Good afternoon and welcome to the annual State of the County event. I'm Martin Noto, 2020 Chair of the Fort Worth Chamber and Executive Vice President, Chief Lending Officer at Inwood National Bank. We are filming this live at the Worthington Hotel, where this event is traditionally held. We are working to keep some of our traditions alive while everything around us seems to be changing. We just wish you could be with us here today. But we're so glad you're joining us virtually to hear from Judge Glen Whitley. In the midst of all the changes and chaos this year, it's safe to say that Judge Whitley has been the calm in the storm. He's guided our community through rough waters, and we're so thankful for his leadership during this time. He's had a few other things to do this year, as well as juggling his traditional events or duties, along with all the new and unprecedented tasks. He has a lot to share with us today, including covering the upcoming election and voting, budget challenges, and his insight on navigating COVID moving forward. We have some very generous sponsors for today's event, and we're so grateful for their continued support. Our presenting sponsor is Sierra Bank, and you'll see Charlie Powell later in the program. Thank you so much to Charlie and to Sierra Bank. Our Vandergrift Award sponsor is Simmons Bank. Our platinum sponsors are Baylor Scott & White, All Saints Medical Center, Fort Worth, BNSF Railway, Frost Bank, Kelly Hart & Holman, and Encore Electric Delivery. The gold, silver, and bronze sponsors are listed with the agenda you received earlier. Thank you all. We could not do these programs without you. And now we're excited to present the annual Vandergrift Award. The award's namesake is the late Tom Vandergrift, Tarrant County Judge from 1991 to 2006. Who gave 60 years of elected service to the citizens of Arlington and Tarrant County in numerous capacities. In his memory, the Vandergrift Award has been established to recognize a company, organization, individual, or event that has positively impacted and will continue to transform Tarrant County. You may be familiar with this year's recipient. They started a social revolution. They changed the face of how we all interact, connect, and communicate. And in 2017, they came to Fort Worth, opening a data center that is growing and expanding still. Our 2020 Vandergrift Award recipient is Facebook Data Center Fort Worth. Having Facebook in our community is a huge win, but it's even bigger than we ever imagined. They care deeply about the success of this area and the businesses here. During this year's crisis, they contributed $250,000 in grants to small businesses who needed a lifeline. Facebook always embraces and supports diversity in business, and they provide numerous resources to boost small business and entrepreneurs. Facebook is practically in every corner of the world, and yet they have a very local perspective. They are fully invested in Tarrant County, and they are still growing here, and that's a big win for us all.
Thank you to Facebook for the incredible $450,000 grant donation to Cook County School District. $200,000 to award. That is a huge amount of money, and we are super thankful for Facebook.
Chamber, RVA, and Facebook have teamed up to create the RVA Business Relief Fund. It's providing grants to Richmond area businesses that have been impacted by COVID-19.
We are so proud to partner with the Community Foundation of Greater Huntsville to make a $100,000 donation to support their COVID-19 relief fund.
Hi, I'm Holly Davies, Community Development Regional Manager with Facebook here in Fort Worth. On behalf of Facebook and the Fort Worth Data Center, I would like to thank the Fort Worth Chamber and Judge Glen Whitley for this incredible honor. Facebook has been a part of Tarrant County since 2015 when we broke ground on our data center here. We love this community and we are committed to a long-term partnership and vitality here in Tarrant County. There are so many small businesses, schools, and nonprofit organizations that make Fort Worth a special place, and we're proud to play a part in supporting them, especially this year when things have been so challenging for all of us. Through our annual Community Action Grants program, we've been able to strengthen these important organizations such as Girls Inc. of Tarrant County, Fort Worth ISD, and Campfire, just to name a few. And we are so very appreciative of the Fort Worth Chamber and the members of Protect the Fort for all they have done to help support local businesses during the COVID-19 pandemic. Facebook is proud to have sponsored this vital program. We know that small businesses are the heart and lifeblood of the communities and local economy. Lastly, I'd like to thank the Fort Worth Chamber again for recognizing Facebook with the 2020 Vandergrift Award. Tarrant County is our home, and we are impressed and humbled every single day that we are here. And with our community partners who are outstanding and just make this such a great place to live and work. Thank you again.
Good afternoon. I'm Charlie Powell, President and CEO of Sierra Bank. Like in previous years, Sierra Bank is proud to be the presenting sponsor for the State of the County Luncheon. And wow, what a difference a year makes. COVID-19 was not even a part of our vocabulary at last year's event. I'm delighted to introduce our honored guest today, a friend I have known for 35 years. Tarrant County Judge Glen Whitley presides over the Tarrant County Commissioners Court. He is a recognized leader on transportation, sustainable communities, efficient government, air quality, higher education, and certainly support for veterans and military families, as well as our youth and children's issues. Judge Whitley graduated from Grand Prairie High School, earned an accounting degree from the University of Texas at Arlington, and served in the United States Naval Reserve. In 1983, he co-founded the accounting firm Whitley Penn, which now has offices in Fort Worth, Dallas, and Houston, and continues to expand. He was elected a Tarrant County Commissioner in 1996 and Tarrant County Judge in 2006. This year, Judge Whitley has been working tirelessly balancing his traditional roles with challenging decisions related to the effect of coronavirus on our community. We are fortunate to have someone who understands the importance of keeping business moving, but cares deeply about the well-being of Tarrant County residents. He and his wife Brenda live in Hurst. They have 3 grown children, 8 grandchildren, and again, I think he'll discuss those grandchildren anytime you want to talk to him. And so today, Judge, thanks for all you do, and I know you have a lot to share with us. Judge Glen Whitley.
Thanks, Charlie. It's a pleasure to be here today. I just wish that the room was full and that we weren't having to mess with these masks. I know many of y'all feel exactly the same way. Man, I'm ready to get 2020 over with. I don't know about y'all. Charlie's right. I'll talk about those grandkids anytime. In fact, I've got another one that's due any day. We were talking with our son last night and saying, okay, what's the plan? And you know, we can't go to the hospital. This will be the first time we haven't been at the hospital for the birth of one of our grandkids, but we're still very, very excited about it. He also mentioned Whitley Penn, and I'm very proud of the fact that I was one of the co-founders of that Whitley Penn accounting firm. They're now they've expanded past just Fort Worth, Dallas, Houston, now to Austin, Midland, Odessa, and actually have an office in Hobbs, New Mexico. So they continue to grow at the same time. And we're just excited that even though I'm not a partner there anymore, that it continues to grow, and I'm very proud of that part. You know, it has been a different year. I guess if you look at this slide that shows that kind of advertises the state of the county, you see behind that slide, or behind the clock tower there, the Blue Angels. We had an opportunity as they flew around thanking first providers and folks for their time with the COVID and working with the COVID. They flew by that, and we were able to get that picture. I guess that's one of the bright spots, if there are any bright spots, to this COVID virus that we've had to deal with all year long. As I begin every one of my talks regardless of the groups, I always start out by thanking the veterans. We enjoy a lot of freedoms, and if it weren't for the sacrifices made by these folks, we wouldn't be able to do that. And so I always want to thank them. I usually ask them to stand. I especially thank those folks who were veterans of the Vietnam era, because when they came back, they didn't get that hero's welcome that so many veterans before and after them have received. They got caught up in a political debate, and so a lot of times they were actually spit on or cursed at, as opposed to getting the hero's welcome for doing their duty and for serving their country, and so I especially want to thank them. The other thing that I always do as I begin one of my conversations, is to stress the importance of spreading the word that there is no reason for domestic violence or for child abuse. You may have been raised in a family where that was something that you saw every day, and you may have come to believe that it was acceptable. And so only if we, especially the men, will have that conversation, and regardless of the size of the group, and just say that it is never okay, it's never justified to strike your spouse or your child, we need to do that. And I've said that for many, many years, and in the last 4 years, we've gotten a DA who takes it even more seriously. And so if an individual wants to continue that, then basically she'll prosecute, and they'll have an opportunity to spend a little time away from their family with folks that they don't necessarily want to spend their time with. So I sincerely hope that we can get that word out, and don't be bashful. The first couple of times I spoke about this, it was a little difficult. It was awkward. There's not really a good way to get into it, and there's not really a good way to get out of it, but it is something that's absolutely critical that we say and that we continue to convey. Okay, how can we start off with anything other than COVID-19 as we talk about this year in review? A lot of people, we started off the year doing great, and then March came. I think we reported our first case around March the 10th. I've had a number of people who have come up and said, well, we just need a redo on 2020. And I say, absolutely not. There ain't no way that we're going to even think about a redo. In fact, if I could wave a wand, I would say about Halloween, that's going to be the end of 2020, and 2021 would just have 14 months. But I can't do that, and so we're going to get through this year. And while everything has changed, there have been some things that have happened that have brought us closer together. Really, since March, on a regular basis, I have had telephone calls, really on a weekly basis, with the mayors, the superintendents, the board members, the city managers of all of our cities and all of our school districts, just talking about how things are going with them and seeking their advice as we go through this process. I've also had calls with many of the social agencies in Tarrant County that have really stepped up and helped folks who never thought they would need help, folks who were out of work, folks who needed food, folks who needed rental assistance, and many other things. And I cannot even begin to tell you how quick everybody has been to come to the aid of their neighbors and the folks that were really in need and never have before in their lives had to experience that. You know, we've had to make some tough decisions this year. And I wish that I could tell you that I knew when we made those decisions whether they were the right or the wrong decisions, or whether we'll ever know exactly whether they were right or wrong. But what I would tell you from my perspective is that as I have looked at making a decision whether to sign an order, whether to do one thing or another, I've always done it first by seeking the advice of folks like our public health, again, our city managers, our school superintendents, our school districts, businesses, these social agencies. We've always talked through it. You know, I don't have the perfect answer. And only through talking and listening and working with other people have we able to get to the point to where I can finally feel comfortable in a decision that I make. Like I said, I'll never know whether it was the right or the wrong one, but at least I feel a little bit more comfortable in what we decide to do and how we go forward. That's been especially true as we've tried to balance the safety health issue of the COVID virus, and at the same time recognize that the consequences of those decisions have severe consequences on our business community, on our economy, on the mental health of many of our individuals. Domestic violence has gone up, child abuse has gone up. So again, we can make a decision over here, but it also has an impact on folks over here. And so throughout this process, we've tried to weigh both sides of the decision-making process. From the very beginning, you remember that we heard about this in the late part of 2019. In the early part of 2020, we began to hear the horror stories of the hospitals in New York being closed. And so that's what began to spread across the country and have us do a little bit more as far as making sure that those hospitals didn't close. So throughout this process, our number one priority was to make sure that the hospitals stayed open. And we've done that, and we will continue to do that. If you go to our public health website, you're going to see a whole bunch of charts that will kind of tell you and slice and dice the statistics every which way you can. The federal government early on came out with the CARES package. If you had a county or a city that had a population over 500,000, then you got a check directly from the federal government. Otherwise, it went to the state, and the state was responsible for distributing out those monies. Those CARES funds have to be spent by December the 30th. And so far, what we've done in Tarrant County is, again, Fort Worth has their own money, and we have taken the money that we got as a county. We've given $62 million to the other cities in Tarrant County. We've allocated about $38 million for testing. Expenses that we just have for PPE and for other things have been about $40 million. Nonprofit agencies, we have given or allocated about $20 million. And for small business grants, we've allocated over $30 million. We've done one round of grants, and this next week we're going to begin our next round of grants. So that's a little bit about COVID right now. And then the next elephant in the room is the elections. Right now, we're in the middle of early voting. It started not this past Tuesday, but the Tuesday before that. I guess it was in November of 2019, we began an approach called the Vote Center approach. And that means that in early voting as well as on Election Day, you can vote at any polling location. Used to be you could do that during early voting, but on Election Day, you had to go to your precinct. Not anymore. You can vote anywhere that there's a polling location, and we think that will allow people a lot more flexibility. To this point, to today, we have voted over 400,000 people out of about 1.2 million registered voters. One of the other things that we've introduced this year was you can go to the website and you can see what the wait times are. So when you go out to vote, if you'll look at this before you go to the voting location, you may decide that you don't want to vote down in Mansfield, which you see as red, but instead you want to go to one of those places that is green. And the way you find that is if you'll go to the Tarrant County website, and then once you get there, if you'll look at the blue, see those little blue dots there, if you will click on the one that says elections, and then it'll bring up this screen that'll say basically highlights. And if you look at that third one in, you see that map, and if you will click on that map, what will appear is that chart that you just saw a few minutes ago, and that is updated about every 5 minutes, and it will tell you what the wait time is as you go through that. Now let's talk a little bit about the voting process and how it works. When we changed to new machines in 2019, one of the things that we wanted to make sure everybody had was a paper ballot, a paper trail. And so you'll go into these machines now and you'll sign in, you'll be given a blank sheet of paper, you'll take that to the machine, you will put the paper in, and it'll take it only part way in. You will actually go through and mark your ballot. And remember, there's no straight party this time, so it's going to take you a little bit longer. So be prepared when you go to that ballot box, print out a sample ballot, go to that same highlights link, and right next to the map, there's a sample ballot. There's the steps that you go through to get that, and it'll be your sample ballot, not just one in general for Tarrant County. Go through, make your choices. At the end, it'll say print the ballot out. So you print the ballot out, you look at that ballot and say, okay, this is what I thought I was doing. And then you go over and you place the ballot in our counter, and it'll scan the ballot in and it'll count your vote, a paper trail. And that's what we wanted. That's what we were looking for in that deal. Now let's shift to another area, and that's public safety. For years, we have been seeing other areas of the country and of the state go to what we call text 911. In the past, you could always call 911, but in some instances, you know, if someone's breaking into your house, you don't want to be talking and telling them where you were. So, here we go.
What was that?
Will be in effect about the middle or the end of November, so right around Thanksgiving. We're very excited about this. We think it will be fully implemented and ready to go again by the end of November. Okay, let's talk a little bit about health care. 2 years ago, y'all approved an $800 million bond project or bond issue for JPS, for our public hospital. Now, ultimately, they're going to put about $400 million in it, so overall, it's going to be a $1.2 billion project. We were slowed a little bit in the beginning because of some of the things that the legislature were doing or were talking about doing last year, and then COVID hit. But we have now just recently hired our program manager. It's Broadus and Associates, and so we're excited about moving forward and what that's going to mean to Tarrant County. It's going to be community centers. It's going to be, we are a teaching hospital. Level 1 trauma, we're going to do a significant emphasis on mental health because that's what y'all said y'all were looking for. So we are very, very excited about moving forward. In addition to that, one of the things that you need to understand is that in Tarrant County, our jail is the largest mental health facility in the county, and this is the same in all your major urban counties. And so what we're doing and we have developed 4 groups. We've got a good group of people working on implementing a diversion center. And what that means is that when the police find someone who's it's a nonviolent individual, but they have committed, a criminal trespass or something along that lines, and they obviously have some mental health issues, then instead of taking them to the jail and booking them into the jail, which will take anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes, and then it puts them into jail, there are going to be a diversion center which they can go by, drop them off, hopefully be in and out in 5 minutes. So it helps the police, it helps the jail, but most importantly, it helps the individual. Because now, instead of that individual being placed in jail and beginning a downward spiral, they'll be placed in the diversion center and they can get the help that they need to get back out into the community. I have to thank one of our commissioners, Roy Brooks, and our DA, Sharon Wilson, who have worked tirelessly on this from the get-go. Again, it's a commissioner's court. There's 4 commissioners and myself. We are partners in a lot of the stuff that we do and we go forward with. We're excited about this. Economic development. As I said, we started out this year, we were doing great. Everything was blowing and going. We got the Dickies Arena open, the rodeo was there, and then COVID hit. But even though it has slowed down our economic development, it's not stopped it. In fact, last night, my wife and I went over to the new AC Hotel on 5th Street between Main Street and Houston, and that's a fantastic place. In fact, we're going back tonight to spend the night and then be able to enjoy downtown. In addition to that, as a result, the NFR, the Super Bowl of rodeos, is coming to this area in December. While the main event will be in Arlington, there's going to be a lot of ancillary awards ceremonies in the Fort Worth area. So again, we're very excited about this. This is the first time in a long, long time that they've moved this out of the Las Vegas area. The other thing is right now, as we speak, the World Series is going on in Arlington, Texas. Now, folks, this is the first time in 116 years that the World Series has been held at a neutral site. And of all the places in this country that they picked to have this, they chose Arlington, Texas, in Tarrant County. And I'm just going to tell you, we couldn't be happier about that. Now, let's talk a little bit about the fiscal health of the county. There has been a lot going on. Certainly, everybody's life has been disrupted by COVID-19, but in my opinion, Tarrant County is still one of the greatest places in the world to live. If you look at Tarrant County and you look at what we're doing and how we rank with other counties, within Texas, we have the lowest combined local property tax rate, well, county as well as county and hospital combined, of the 6 urban counties within this state. We're very, very proud of that. Our pension plan is 89.3% funded. You hear all the time about entities that are really underwater in their pension. We are not. We have got a good reserve, a good financial reserve within our county, and that's because we have department heads, elected officials, and employees who take very seriously the dollars that you pay to the county in the form of taxes. This year, when we passed our budget, we were under what the state has now said is the no new revenue rate. And that's something that we're, again, very proud of. But you know what? That rate could be lower. And I really want to stress this, that even though we're the lowest, we believe that local property taxes are still way too high. And so I want to explain that a little bit. And the first thing before we get into that, we really need to look at basically what local governments do. And when I talk about local governments, I'm talking about the schools, I'm talking about the cities, I'm talking about the counties. We are the ones that provide the majority of those services. And as we do that, you just see here a few examples: the police, the courts, the bridges, roads, the fire, the schools, all of those things. So we provide all of those services, and you know, it's really the same throughout this country. It's the same in Texas as it is in Nebraska, or as it is in North Carolina, or as it is in Washington. We're all providing about the same services to our citizens. At the same time, we are the ones that pay for those services. So how do we rank? When you look at the total taxes collected, and that's not just property taxes, that's everything, how do we rank in comparison to the other 49 states? And when you look at that, I think we should be proud. From a just pure dollars collected, Texas ranks 31st. Now this information, the latest information that we have is from 2017. So again, 31st as a dollars, pure dollars collected. If we look at those dollars as a percentage of personal income, we rank 35th. So in both of those categories, and again, this is all of the taxes collected to provide all of the services that you receive from local government, we, I think, are, we're in the bottom half. And so I think that's something to be proud of. And what I would just say is so when you look at that and you hear someone say we're overtaxed, I don't think that's true. I just disagree with that 100%. But I do agree when somebody says we're over property taxed. And let me give you an example of that. Take the same ranking. How do we stand when we are looking at the property tax? Well, unfortunately, we're not down in the lower half. We're up in the upper half. And we're actually 13th, and again, this is 2017 data. And what it says is that we're collecting about $1,872 per person in property taxes. That's too high. I don't like being 13th in that. Now, a big part of that, as you well know when you pay that property tax, is the schools. In fact, over 50% of that $1,872 per person is taxes that we pay for schools, for public education. If we reduce that, if public education was paid for out of something other than property tax, we would move immediately from 13th to 42nd. If we just paid for half of it, with some other form of tax, we would move from 13th to 29th. Folks, I've begun hearing that business, when they look at Texas, property taxes is something that they're seeing as a little high, and that's why when new businesses are moving here, many times you'll see the local jurisdictions giving property tax abatements or tips. So who decides what taxes are used to pay for what services? Well, that's the state legislature. And if you look at this chart, what you see is that local government, and remember I just said that most of the services you receive are performed and paid for by local government. For the most part, legislature allows counties, schools, and special districts only to use property tax to pay for these services. Cities get a little bit of sales tax, a little bit of hotel occupancy tax, but for the most part, they're still in property. So what you've got is a situation where property taxes are having to pay for almost all of those essential services. Now, in the past, you've heard me use this word, unfunded mandates. And it's always something that I have to spend a lot of time explaining what it is and how it occurs. So I've come up with what I think is a better description of exactly what this is. Now, some may disagree with me, but I like it anyway. What I'm going to call it, instead of an unfunded mandate, it's a state-mandated property tax. So again, just to give you a couple examples, you've seen this before. This past year, and our year ended on September the 30th, this past year in Tarrant County, we housed state prisoners, and they did not reimburse us for any of that, and that came to a total of $17,500,000. That's property taxes you paid because the state did not pay for their prisoners. And if you look at the graph on this, you see this in this slide right here, what you see is that flat part is what normally would have occurred. But then COVID-19 came along, and the state got a little worried about how their budget was going to look, so they stopped taking prisoners. Now, they said, well, we don't want to take a prisoner, and maybe they come down with COVID, and they bring it into our state prisons. Bottom line, they stopped taking the prisoners, and you can see that trend of moving upward. And that's what caused us to go from about $12 to $13 million to over $17 million. That's one of those state-mandated property tax increases. Another still deals with the court system. We arrest somebody for a felony crime. And when we do that, and if they don't have any money, they can claim that they want us to pay for their defense. And several years ago, 2001, the state passed a law that said we had to do it. Now, they said, well, we're going to reimburse the counties for that. They've never reimbursed more than about 25% of that. And so as a result, this last year, you paid in property taxes over $19 million to defend these folks who were accused of crimes and were basically said, well, we don't have any money, so we had to hire their attorney. In addition to that, in the small counties, the state pays for the criminal district attorney. In Tarrant County, because we have so many cases, they do pay a portion of Sharon Wilson's salary, but in addition to that, for our felony cases, we have over 130 additional attorneys. They're prosecuting for the state, but the state's not paying for that. That costs you in property taxes an additional $17 million. So when you take that number, so that's a total of almost $36,500,000. You add that to the state prisoners, and we're talking about over $54 million. So those are two just for the county. Now let's talk about the 800-pound gorilla. The 800-pound gorilla is public education. Each one of you just received your tax notice, and if you looked on that notice, you know as well as I do that the largest line item on there is the state's public education, the ISDs. The state has a responsibility, constitutional responsibility, to provide a free public education. What they've chosen to do is to basically make the local school districts pay for a good portion of that through property tax, and then they fill in the gap between that and what they feel like is the minimum that we should be paying for each student to receive free public education every year. So again, let's look at that chart where I had the X's in the checks. Now remember, I told you earlier that the state doesn't have a property tax. You can look at that chart and see, well, and in fact, constitutionally, state constitution prevents them from having a statewide property tax. So what do? When they want to basically do something and have a property tax, they just pass a law and don't pay for it. So while they may say we don't have property taxes, they do. They have it through basically state-mandated property tax increases at the local level, at the cities, at the counties, and most assuredly at the school districts. Now, I'm fixing to introduce a new concept, and you see that little out-of-state money. Remember that, because that's folks who come to Texas either for tourism or they buy a product that was created or produced in Texas, and it's out of state. And it's out of state is where it ends up. And so what I'm going to suggest to you is maybe we need to involve them a little bit more in paying for some of the services in our state. So here is, I'm going to go back to, remember what I said, we're 35th when you take all of the taxes we collect to pay for all of the services that we provide. And you look at this, and here's the various breakdown of where those taxes come from, and you can see that of all of those dollars that are raised in taxes, of which ranks 35th, property taxes are over 50% of that. So that's why I say that property taxes are way too high. Here are just a few of the others that are used. You see sales, motor vehicle, gas, severance. Those percentages that are green, in my mind, are the ones that are prime candidates to allow for folks outside of our state to pay for some of the services, if not a lot of the services that we provide here in Texas. Again, if you take that property tax, that 50.63%, and you divide that down, you see, as we mentioned earlier, that of that, over 50% of the 50%, or 27% of the total, are school property taxes. The cities and the counties each represent about 8% of those total property taxes, collected, and then we've got special districts. So those 4 entities, for the most part, are how your property taxes are divided. Again, what happens, here's just a few of the items. Again, if we paid for the schools out of some other form of tax, then we would go from 13th in property taxes to 42nd. If we just paid for half of that, $32 billion, and made it $16 billion, we would go from 13th to 29th. Both are a whole lot better than where we are right now at 13th. So what are some of these other taxes that I'm talking about? Sales tax. When we go and buy a product, we pay 6.25% to the state. We pay 2% for most cities. That amounts to about $37 billion a year, or it did in 2017. Other people's money. When people come in here and they buy services, or they buy dinner, or they do those things, they go over to Wet n Wild or Six Flags or the ballpark or AT&T Stadium, they're paying sales tax. A lot of those folks come in from out of state. A lot of them come in. This term, I first heard this term used by Jeff Williams, the mayor in Arlington, and he referred to it as other people's money. And Arlington is such an entertainment mecca that basically a lot of the people who come there are not from Arlington, but we all help Arlington City's citizens not pay as much in property taxes. Another one is gas tax. We haven't actually raised the gas tax since 1991. When you look at where we rank in gas tax, we're about 42nd already in gas tax. And remember, 5 cents of the 20 cents we pay goes to education. If you looked at it as only 15% for transportation, we'd be 49th. So that's another area, and a lot of people drive through. You don't hit the border in Shreveport or there in Marshall and get to El Paso without filling up at least one time. There's not too many places you go, or you can go in and out of the state without having to fill up for gas. Again, other people's money. Maybe not as much, but still some. Okay, this next one, severance tax. Just think of all the oil that Texas exports. We export it as pure crude oil, but we also a lot of times will convert it into other things. Jet fuel that we'll sell to American Airlines. Think of how many passengers that American Airlines sells tickets to, and so they spread that jet fuel tax to a lot of people outside of the state of Texas. So that's another example, and it could be a very huge example of other people's money or out-of-state money that could help lower our property tax. Hotel occupancy tax. When somebody comes in and spends the night, there's a hotel occupancy tax. Most of those folks are coming here for conventions. A lot of them are coming here from out of state. Right now, there's a lot of people from LA and from Tampa Bay coming in to watch the World Series. So they would be helping to pay for that. So what I'm asking the legislature to consider doing as they begin their meeting in January is tax diversification. And I really want to emphasize, I'm not talking about tax increase. With all the dollars we collected, we're 35th. I'm happy with 35th. I don't think we need to collect anything more. But what we do need to do is we need to stop putting so much of the burden, over 50%, on property taxes, and instead we need to share and spread the wealth around to some of those other taxes, many of which are being paid for by out-of-state people. And that, to me, is a very simple solution. So property tax reduction, flexibility, give us within each county or within each city the flexibility of looking at other sources of tax revenue, dollar for dollar switch, and use other people or people outside of the state of Texas. What could that mean? Here's just a couple of those. Remember those ones that I mentioned earlier and said they were a part of that graph? We've probably got 20 other taxes that we didn't even list in that pie chart because they're very, very small. But if we just redirected some of the property taxes to some of these taxes, it could make a big difference on your property tax bill that you're fixing to pay in the next couple of months. So property taxes, we said earlier, $59 billion. Sales tax raises about $37 billion from that standpoint. But motor vehicles is not much of a switch because most of the states around us, their motor vehicle tax when you purchase a new car is lower than ours. So people aren't coming to Texas to buy the car to take it back to Louisiana. But when you get to gas tax, when you get to severance tax, state hotel tax, all of those have a component that would represent out-of-state people buying services, buying these things, and the taxes they would pay would stay in Texas, would lower your property taxes, or could lower your property taxes. So basically, that's it. We've had a great year, at least all the way up until March, and we're going to get through this. Nobody is looking more forward to getting rid of these masks than me, because not only do I not like wearing them, I don't like particularly the grief I get, especially every Tuesday at our court meetings, when it comes time to let the people tell me what they think of my decision to put them in those masks. What I love about Tarrant County is that we work together, we collaborate, we're not an island to ourselves. The cities, the county, the schools, the hospital CEOs, as I said, and I want everybody, if you don't take anything else away from COVID, from the discussion about COVID, is that the focus is keeping the hospitals open. That's the prime focus, and it will continue to be that. We're going to get through this. We're going to get through it by working together, by helping each other out. If you can volunteer some time, get with your favorite charity. United Way campaign is coming up. I cannot even begin to tell you how much United Way has stepped up and been flexible in the very things that they're doing. In fact, we're kicking off our United Way campaign at the county. In the past, we've had events like you could buy a hamburger, or you could go to a fish fry and do a lot of those things. Because of the crowds, because of COVID, we're not going to do that. We're doing an online auction this year. One of the things that I have said, I always have a little friendly competition with Betsy down at the city of Fort Worth. With the exception of the first year, we beat them bad every year after that, and we're going to beat them bad this year. I've put a goal out there to the county and to the county employees, and money's raised for this. And if we hit that, I'm going to shave my head. Now, folks, there's some county employees that are pretty excited about that. And I've decided that in that online auction, one of the items in there will be a pass at the judge's head with the clippers. So if you'd really like to help make me bald, then go to our online auction and bid on it, and the winning bidder, as long as we make our goal, the winning bidder will get one pass with the clippers at the judge's head. So again, I want to thank everybody for taking a part in this virtual State of the County meeting. I'm looking forward next year to getting back and looking out and seeing Linebarger over here and Powell and his group over there, and UNT and Lockheed and all of the rest of you here to celebrate the year that Tarrant County has had. Again, thank you very much for all you do for our county. Thank y'all.
Judge Whitley, appreciate you, appreciate all you do for us. I'm going to sit down with the judge after this, and we're going to have a little bit more in-depth Q&A, and we'll be releasing that on our social media channels next week. But I'm keen to hear, did we make mistakes during COVID? what's the judge's relationship with the judge in Dallas County and the different dynamics there. So it'll be a good conversation that we will release next week. Also next week on Tuesday at 11:30, we're going to have Commissioner Christy Craddock. She's the chairman of the Railroad Commission, and she's going to give us an update on the energy production numbers and upcoming legislative session and the budget forecast. So it's free to watch next Tuesday at 11:30. And let's please give it up for our sponsors. Again, our presenting sponsor is Sierra Bank. We appreciate them. Our Vandergrift Awards sponsors, Simmons Bank. Platinum sponsors, Baylor Scott & White All Saints Medical Center, Fort Worth. BNSF Railway, Frost Bank, Kelly Hart & Hallman, Encore Electric Delivery. Thank you so much for your support, and I want to thank the Renaissance for providing this amazing space. And I want to encourage you all, get out and vote, make your voice be heard this election season, stay safe, wear a mask. Thank you so much. We'll get through this together. Have a great Friday.